Morning, guys. Happy Friday, my favourite day of the week. I'm actually quite early today, so just before I start clinic, just a question that's come through about how to deal with catastrophizing. So first of all, what is catastrophizing? So basically, catastrophizing, that's a word and a half, is a symptom of anxiety. And what happens is the brain always thinks that something's going to turn out badly. So for instance, a salesperson that hasn't had a few sales in a while immediately thinks he catastrophizes, and he immediately thinks he's going to lose his job over it. So these are all stories that we're making up in our head about a future thing that hasn't happened yet. And we always seem to think that it's a negative. Okay, so going back to anxiety, anxiety is a protective mechanism, and it's based on a program that's running in the hard drive of your brain, in the unconscious part of your brain, based on an old story, an old event, an old memory. The problem is the unconscious mind still thinks that old story that's no longer relevant in your life is still now. Okay, so our thoughts, imagine a highway of the brain, okay, a highway, and those thoughts are, if they're negative thoughts, they go along this highway. So every time something happens, this negative thought kicks in. Okay, so I use a lot of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for this. And the question was, what can they do about it? So they're on a wait list for CBT. CBT is very, it takes time. And the reason that it takes time is that highway, that negative part of our brain, is really strong. And I've spoken about this before. Okay, this is a familiar highway. Our brain knows how to use this highway. So with the CBT, what we do is we try and start a new highway, a new, more logical highway that initially isn't very familiar. Okay, it's like a new road that we haven't been down, so we have to think about using it. It's not one that we can just get on the highway, daydream, and off we go. But once we start that new highway and we keep using it, what will happen is this will become more familiar, and this one, the old one, the negative one that's not benefiting us at all, will become overgrown. So that's actually then harder to use. So a few incidents. So basically these things, any form of protective mechanism is based on an old trauma and an old event. So the way that I work is I generally go and we use the unconscious mind to try and find why that protective mechanism is still running, okay? And there'll be something based on childhood. Now, the other thing that we do is we get the client to start practicing how to change those thoughts. And the first thing that we do is we recognize those thoughts, because without recognizing that negative thought, we can't do anything about it. Okay, and this takes practice. Okay, it's like riding a bike. It takes a while to master it, but you need to keep going. The way I think of the brain is it's a muscle, okay? Just in the same way that you've got an arm muscle, leg muscles, okay? So you don't expect to go to the gym and then build that muscle and for it to stay strong. You have to keep working at it. So think about it as brain training. So once we've recognized that thought, we then want to logically think about it. So we're changing which part of our brain we're using. We're using the logical part. Okay, so once we've got it, we look at that thought, okay? I always think it's a great idea, get a diary, carry it around with you, okay? We look at that thought and we think, does that thought benefit me? Is that thought real, or am I making it up? And then we change it. We think, okay, is there a more beneficial thought? What's the positive way this could happen? So we've looked at it, we've recognized it, and then we've logically decided whether it's benefiting us, whether it's real, and then we change it. And the more that we actually do that get that positive highway, the more that our brain will then start using the positive one, and the negative one becomes redundant. So it does take practice. Carry a diary around with you. First thing is to recognize it. Okay, recognize that you're being unrealistic. You're thinking about something in the future and you're making stories up in your head. A client said to me once, a perfect way, she just says, I'm playing make believe. Okay, this is it. You're reading a story and you're making up a future that hasn't happened. If you're doing that in a negative way, why not change it and do it in a positive way? This is going to be fantastic. This is going to turn out well. Okay, so start off with those little techniques. Recognize the thought, look at whether it can be changed, look at a better option to it, and change it to a more positive one. And then keep practicing, 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 so that that new positive highway will be the one that your brain chooses in the future. Hope that helps, guys. See ya.